Hey YouTube, this is QuantumJoker, and I'm here with Rmlohner.
Team Jacob.
I guess I'm the same. Yeah, Rmlohner is the creator of the opinionated Lost episode guide, and we're here to discuss Breaking Dawn Part 1, the fourth and second last of the film adaptations of Stephanie Meyer's literary phenomenon. No, I only grudgingly call it that. Ryan, would you like to share what you thought about the film?
Well, I actually saw it with my mother because she was just so curious about this thing I've been raving about, like ranting for a year now. And the whole car ride home, I kept trying to explain it to her, and I couldn't get through because she kept trying to apply logic to the whole thing. And you can't do that. That way lies madness. There's something about this series that I'm surprised doesn't come up more often. I guess the imprinting on a baby is just such a distraction. But if you think about how Eclipse ends, Victoria, the main villain, is dead, and there's a treaty between the vampires and werewolves, so the story is over. And, like, the sad, pathetic souls who actually like the series got all the closure they would need.
And I felt as if, Breaking Dawn Part 1 was in itself a valid conclusion. It doesn't really need to go any further than that.
Yeah, I was actually expecting the ending to just be the werewolves about to attack the house, because that would have been a decent cliffhanger, but they had to ruin it.
Mm-hmm. And, neither of us like the Twilight series.
No.
I did kind of like the movies at one point. Even now, I would say that at best they're okay. I thought that New Moon was okay. Like 2.5 out of 5, which is that's the best you can get.
Yeah, there are things about all the movies that I like, mostly just the way they look.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can tell these directors are trying, but you just can't save this material.
Well, I think all of the films have good cinematography, and I did actually somewhat enjoy the action in the third film.
Oh, yeah. Like, that could have been a decent movie if they just focused more on the fighting.
Yeah.
And it gave backstories to Jasper and Rosalie that made them a lot more interesting than anyone else. I want a whole movie on Rosalie now, actually. It's Kill Bill with vampires. How can that not be awesome?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have commented on how the supporting characters are not only better actors than the main cast, but they're also more interesting. Jasper was, I think he's like 150 years old. He was he's Confederate soldier.
He's Bill Compton, basically, from True Blood.
I'm afraid I don't get that reference. Sorry.
He's basically a ripoff of the main vampire character from True Blood or the Sookie Stackhouse Mysteries. Take your pick.
Okay. I don't know if that show ever got here, or at least it never. I don't know if it was ever screened on the free channels. It might have gone here on cable, but I certainly never got it, unfortunately. But
that's good.
I'll try to check it out. But there are the twihards, the teenagers, preteens, teenagers, and also 40-year-old moms who like Twilight honestly. Then you've got people who like Twilight ironically. People like Spoonie or Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, who enjoy the films for how bad they are. Would you consider yourselves one of those people who likes the film, that likes the series ironically?
I guess, I've never watched the first 3 movies without the riff tracks, actually. This is the first one I've done that with, and I swear, even with the riff tracks, those movies feel 3 hours long. I can't watch them in one sitting.
I guess with Breaking Dawn, I guess it kept me interested, I suppose, but in the same way that Battlefield Earth kept me interested.
You've got this whole...
Battlefield Earth, it has action, it has explosions, it has dogfights, and I'm one of the few people who actually did like John Travolta as Turl. I actually thought he was a good villain. But, in spite of all this excitement on screen in both, in Battlefield Earth and air quotes, excitement, air quotes, in Breaking Dawn, in spite of the excitement, I don't care about anyone in either film. So it's kind of like Sleeping Beauty, it's interesting, but in a very insubstantial, half-assed way.
I felt the same way watching the Transformers movies, where they want you to have these big emotional moments with these characters, but they haven't earned that.
It's kind of like Owen Citizen's definition of pretension, profundity that hasn't been earned. This is essentially drama that hasn't been built, in a way.
And the first two movies, they're completely hobbled by having to spend their whole first hours building up to a reveal that everyone already knows. Edward's a vampire and then Jacob's a werewolf. And then Breaking Dawn, you actually have this very Cronenbergian body horror story, which could have been good, if we cared.
Actually, in Breaking Dawn, actually, I'll go ahead and get my very general thoughts on the film out of the way. Breaking Dawn, to me, Eclipse was the Twilight film that opened my eyes to how bad the series is. Breaking Dawn is bad for the same reason Eclipse, the original Twilight, and to a somewhat lesser extent, New Moon was. I still think New Moon is the best in the series, even though it wasn't that good.
Directed by Mr. Golden Compass himself. Mr. American Pie. I don't know why they hired him, but he did good.
Breaking Dawn, it has bland character, bland acting, dull characters, a completely unconvincing romance, illogical behavior from...
That's the book where there's about 30 blank pages, just because she's sitting around moping because she can't function without a guy around.
And the fact that, the film, these bad elements are made they're made even worse because they're supposed to carry the whole film. The romance between Edward and Bella, the love triangle between those two and Jacob, that's basically the same series, but it's dismal.
I think Stephenie Meyer's been pretty open that Bella's supposed to be a role that girls can insert themselves into, so she has no real characterization of her own. And, neither does Edward really, so we're just left with no idea what they see in each other besides looks.
But, also, I think I would consider Breaking Dawn to be the worst film I've seen all year.
Oh, yes.
Despite some good elements, which I'll if you saw them too, we'll both get to later. And I think that the reason Breaking Dawn is my worst film of the year is because of the really heavy-handed yet confused anti-abortion stance of the film.
It's written by a Mormon, so you know going in what side it's going to be on. Although, from what I understand, I could be talking out of my ass here, but I think the mother's life being in danger is one of the circumstances that Mormons say abortion is okay for. So I don't know what she was really thinking there.
I think, I'm not all that experienced in, American politics, but, I think a recent politician named, Christine O'Donnell, is that right?
I think so.
And she had, has an anti-abortion stance, but she also asserts that, if the mother is in danger, then abortion may be acceptable. no, I'm pro-choice. So I found the Twilight taking on the issue of abortion. It really did. The film really didn't. Well, even if it took a position I didn't approve of. Even if it's taking an anti-abortion stance. It could have done that well, and I would have, I guess, appreciated it, even though I didn't agree. But the film did a really bad job of it.
Like, they don't know what they're really discussing here. Like, I'm pro-choice too, but if Tim Tebow, for example, wants to talk to me about being pro-life, I'll listen to him because he actually has a position to come from that has weight.
Yeah, Edward and various other members of the Cullen family are like angrily adamant about getting the growing vampire human fetus out of Bella, and they're referring to it as it or that thing. So it really feels like
it's like Dayhawk from Xena, really.
Who?
Dayhawk, the dark god from Xena Warrior Princess. There's a whole arc about
that. But it just feels like the film is throwing at us really offensive caricatures of people who support abortion. It's portraying abortion as abortion kills babies, which is a rubbish position. Abortion, people who support abortion want to murder babies. That looks as if it seems to be what the film is trying to say.
And this is really the one time that Bella's been allowed to stand up for herself, so of course it's like this huge controversial political position that half the audience will be against.
She's holding on to it pretty rationally. Well, she's I've said before that New Moon is the least bad in the series, but even in that film, which I think was okay, she was quite self-destructive. In this film, she's asserting her will for once, but she's still going through that same self-destructive path.
Like, one of the few really sympathetic characters is her father, who we're not supposed to think about, because he just has this complete sociopath daughter who lies to him and never tells him anything what she's doing.
I actually felt quite sorry for him while watching the film.
Like, the one thing I've seen him in before is season 2 of 24, where he plays this abusive jackass husband. And then her mother's Nina Myers from 24, so that's weird casting there.
It's funny, a couple of weeks ago, I saw Breaking Dawn a couple of weeks ago. The theater, I think it had at least 20 other people. So it was actually fairly empty, much emptier than I expected.
Mine too.
But whenever I saw, Bella's father, frowning as he led his daughter to the altar and, kind of sullenly giving them his best wishes, I actually said out loud, "Poor guy." I actually heard someone chuckle behind me.
He's completely given up at this point.
Yeah.
She's a lost cause. At least she's not keeping him awake anymore.
Also, one thing I really didn't like about Breaking Dawn, right off the bat, was how, I guess I'd put it, comically horny Bella was. Edward and Bella have no chemistry. That's obvious by now. They don't have any common interests. So really, the only reason it seems as if the only reason they get together is because Bella wants to have sex with Edward. That's it.
Well, it is an accurate teenage relationship in that respect.
I guess. But, after they consummate their union, Bella ends up with a few minor bruises, and, Edward then states that he'll never do that with Bella again. But then this is another part that kind of insulted me. I found offensive. Bella is, no joke, she's basically presenting during the honeymoon.
Like, I imagine it has to be pretty painful, too, because it's been described that vampire skin is like rock.
Yeah, actually, did you see that Twilight review by Jeremy Johns?
I don't think so.
He joked that, when Edward and Bella both become vampires, they probably sound like this. Or if, Edward's the slow and sweet guy, he'd sound like this, or I can't really do it with my knuckles. It'd sound like that.
And then they play chess because the movie thinks it's the Thomas Crown Affair.
Well, there you go, with your obscure references. I'm afraid I don't know anything about that one either, I'm afraid.
Well, it's the movie with the sexy chess scene. That's all it's really known for now. It becomes this whole, very body horror type story, and at the same time, it's got great makeup effects, I'll say that for it, but we don't care about any of the characters, so we can't really connect like we could in something like The Brood or The Fly. And I'll say, right now, just watch those if you want to see how this kind of story could have been done right. I don't know why they didn't just get Cronenberg himself to do this movie, with how it ends up.
But actually, the birthing scene was actually one of the only parts of Breaking Dawn that I liked. I actually thought that it was done quite well.
It gets really gruesome. I don't know why they didn't just go for an R rating.
Yeah, although I guess that would have, that would have stopped. Well, in theory, it would have stopped a lot of the audience from seeing the movie.
It has, Edward ducking out of frame when he's chewing the baby out, but you still get the sound effects going nuts. It's like an early Peter Jackson movie.
I thought it was actually quite disturbing. I think it surprisingly, it actually does what a lot of good horror movies are supposed to do. In that, as you said, it uses rather nauseating sound effects, and it keeps the action largely out of frame, thus leaving our imaginations to fill in what's going on. I can't think of any good examples off the top of my head, but that sort of subtlety is what a lot of good horror movies do. So I actually thought, the birthing scene was actually done quite well.
Although I don't really get, Rosalie's going to maybe, kill Bella or kill the baby or something bad because Edward stops her and then he throws her out of the room, but then they're fine with her holding the baby. What the hell happened there?
I think I got that while seeing the film. Oh, and how did you feel when, Jacob imprinted on Renesmee?
That's the part when I was reading the Wikipedia synopsis that I figured this cannot be the product of an entirely sane mind. Because, I turned to my mother in the theater and I just gestured to the screen. See, this is what I've been talking about. You can't defend this.
Was Jacob essentially, he becomes essentially a literal soulmate of this, 18-minute-old baby.
That looks 5 months old because of the vampire accelerated growth baby Alia from Dune thing.
He effectively falls in love with a baby, which is creepy.
I'd love to know what direction Taylor Lautner was given for that scene, because I can't imagine Bill Condon just told him this is where you have sexual fantasies about a baby. Let's see Tom Cruise tackle that part.
Also, the notion that when a werewolf imprints on another person, that target of imprinting is protected. Is protected from harm.
That's never come up before. They talk about imprinting, but not that rule.
But that felt like a huge plot contrivance. Just a way to, just a very clunky, clunky way to resolve the werewolves want to kill the baby plot. Stephanie Meyer just pulled it out of her ass.
Well, she also did the whole vampires can get a human woman pregnant. And when that's said earlier in the books, although not in the movie, I think that that can't happen. And
Have you actually read the books?
No. No,
I haven't either.
something I was really wondering during part of this was what kind of impact have vampires had on pop culture in this world? Because when like Edward's looking up on Google like what human vampire hybrids are, why doesn't he get a bunch of Buffy Spike fanfics? And the whole climax of New Moon revolves around Edward planning to reveal himself, even though no one would see a guy sparkling and think that's a vampire. Although they don't sparkle in the last two movies. Because it's not convenient to the story anymore.
Yes, Stephanie Meyer, she the vampires in her stories, they are very far removed from prevailing notion of a vampire throughout history. I think Movie Bob described them as, superhumans who just happen to drink blood, which is apt. And, that kind of vampire, it would probably make for a good superhero if it were put in a different story. Because, they're super fast, super strong, they don't need to breathe.
Just give us the full version of Rosalie's backstory. That would be great.
Yeah.
Even Jasper's, as much of a ripoff of True Blood as it is.
Or any of it,
I don't think we know how Carlisle became a vampire.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Actually,
why he made the choice that he did to have his family.
You could probably turn the Cullen family into a decent sitcom. or sitcom with drama elements. Soap opera, whichever is the right term.
Turn him into Barnabas Collins.
By the way, remember the scene with Jacob in wolf form?
Oh, yeah.
Staring down the pack leader? A lot of critics found that unintentionally funny, but weirdly enough, I didn't.
Well, it's kind of because you've never seen them communicate like this before. Although it kind of makes sense that we just maybe haven't seen it before. The CGI is terrible. Although
not that good.
I get that fur is very hard to do, but I think they could have done better.
Although Superman Returns had some of the worst CGI I've ever seen. There's a scene in which Clark Kent is running through the cornfields, and the corn is CGI, and it's obvious CGI. I've gotten completely off track.
And the one thing that really got to me that I also haven't seen talked about much is Edward has the whole angsty speech in the beginning about how he had a phase of tracking down serial killers and killing them. And that reminded me really of what I said about Kate from Lost when her big crime was revealed. They came up with a story for someone with a dark past because that would make them interesting, but then the question becomes, how do you keep them likable? And in both cases, the answer is to give them a crime so sympathetic that it might as well have just been feeding a starving puppy in a city where that's illegal.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Why does it? Well, I guess fiction has differing morality in some ways differing moralities from real life. You can wish that people get killed and not be seen as a sicko when you're watching a film, but you would appear that way in real life. So you're thinking to yourself, why does Edward feel remorseful? And I think I remember you stating at one point, in one of your videos, that that Bella is a Mary Sue character. Could you go into detail on that?
Well, it's kind of partially now, and she's partially just a complete unlikable sociopath. And actually, in the Vampire Diaries, which, I made the video of how I love it, there's a character named Catherine who's basically Bella, and she's one of the bad guys. And it works incredibly well. Because, the way it's presented, she's just screwing with these two guys' heads for her own sick pleasure. There's no other way to interpret it. And also, she's kind of the Mary Sue because, like I said before, she's written for people to insert themselves into and see themselves as this perfect girl who has two hot guys fighting over her for no reason that we can tell.
Of course, everyone else has gone over this before, but, throughout the Twilight series, Bella comes across as an unlikable whore. She well, of course, I can't really speak from experience on a few levels about certain things in the Twilight series. Of course, I've never been married. I'm a virgin, and so on. I've never had two girls fighting over me. I wish, but of course, you can have very close friends when you're married. But Bella still treats Jacob like someone who's even closer than Edward. Edward even points out at one point that Bella tells Jacob things that she won't tell Edward.
Like, she spends all of New Moon leading him on, and then has the nerve to say at the end, why can't you accept that it's always going to be Edward? Yeah. Then in Eclipse she kisses him, and after that, Edward is actually the one to track him down and bring him to the wedding. Like, that makes sense.
It just comes across as borderline unfaithful to, or at the very least inconsiderate to, tie the knot with Edward, and yet gets so close to, still remains so close to Jacob. Although, there I go, actually putting care into the series.
And you can kind of tell, like, with Eclipse, suddenly Jacob acts a lot more unlikable, which I've read, like, a lot of people suspect that Stephenie Meyer realized she'd screwed up and made him too likable in New Moon. Yeah. So she had to just change his character out of nowhere to make people accept Edward again.
And, did you stay after the credits?
No.
No. Neither did I. Although I heard that we do get a scene with the Volturi, who are, the ruling class of vampires.
It's Carlisle with an S.
With an S. That doesn't even make sense. But, if nothing else, I like Michael Sheen, so... Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing him in Breaking Dawn Part 2.
The weird thing is, like, everything I've heard about the book is in this movie, so I don't know what's left for Part 2. Maybe it really is all in the first half.
I think Part 2 is simply the Volturi, arriving in Forks, was it?
Yeah.
Is that where? Yeah, that's where it's set. Arriving in Forks to kill Renesmee.
It's nice to get a pronunciation on Renesmee, because you can't tell just looking at the word.
Apparently the Volturi want to kill Renesmee because they mistook her for, I think, a child who was turned into a vampire. Apparently that's forbidden. But I really don't see how you could make another, 2 or 2.5 hour movie out of that.
Well, this one was already, padded all to hell.
Yeah.
With all the montages.
Yeah.
The getting ready to have sex montage, packing up.
Oh, hang on, that reminded me. This growing inhuman fetus inside Bella is sapping her strength and, turning her very frail and thin. No, it's essentially killing her as it grows. And Carlisle, I think Jacob initially has the idea. Carlisle then, I think, gets a few bags of blood, pours them into a styrofoam cup, and has Bella drink the blood
with a straw.
I would have thought that blood would be too thick to go through a straw.
And it makes no scientific sense anyway, because the baby isn't directly getting the food. It's broken down into nutrients.
Yeah, well, the fetus would get the nutrients through the placenta, like any other fetus. You don't, as far as I know, you don't actually get the nutrients from the food you eat for a few hours. Also, humans, I think I heard this somewhere else, humans don't have the necessary digestive enzymes they would need to digest blood. So there's no way that the baby would have immediately, or even really at any time, have gotten blood gotten nutrients, sustenance from the blood Bella drank. And she remarked, she took a sip of that blood and remarked, "It's good," which struck me as really sick.
I've licked blood off a bleeding finger a couple times when I was a kid. I don't remember it tasting good.
Well, I'm mostly a pescatarian, so I don't eat much meat. I could imagine blood tasting good, but and I know that well, that sounded creepy. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know that Bella is married to a vampire, and she will become a vampire. Well, she was promised that she would be turned into a vampire in the future. But even so, there is something fundamentally gross about anything that, any unnatural thing that consumes blood. If you're talking about a vampire bat or a leech, that's fine, because they evolved to eat blood, and they don't cause harm except for diseases the bat might carry. Well, there is something inherently gross about a vampire consuming blood, human and still animal blood. It's still gross when they drink animal blood, but to have a human enjoy the taste of blood, even taking into account the fact that she's married to a vampire and she'll become a vampire, it's still sick. It's still disturbing that she would enjoy it beyond how it's supposed to save her baby.
And, actually, Edward spends the first 3 movies/books trying to talk her out of becoming a vampire, as I recall. Yeah. So now he's suddenly perfectly okay with it.
It was kind of funny how Edward keeps biting Bella.
It's probably not helping very much. That's what I was thinking the whole time.
Enough venom to turn into a vampire.
And she's probably losing more blood than the venom's going in.
Oh, and, this will probably come across as, blasphemy to a lot of nerds, but I'm sure some were thinking it. You know how Bella came back from the dead as a vampire, literally after she died, giving birth? That's actually a little reminiscent of the Doctor regenerating from the 7th to the 8th in the TV movie after dying.
I haven't seen that.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
I was thinking Requiem for a Dream.
I'm afraid I haven't seen that film. I should, though. I should.
And I'm actually kind of interested in how she's going to talk to her parents about this now. Because you have to bring it up. She has red eyes. They're going to notice that.
Yeah. I did read on Wikipedia that apparently Bella no longer visits her mother, as she doesn't want her mother. She doesn't want to distress her mother with the fact that she looks deathly pale and has, as you said, red eyes and is a vampire. But really, whatever you are, whatever you've become, your mother, short of you becoming a rapist or a serial killer, your mother is going to want to see you. So it wouldn't make a difference if you're a vampire.
And she has that big breakdown at the wedding.
I don't remember that.
Which is her most memorable scene so far, her most relatable one at least.
But it just seems quite low for Bella. This is another instance of her being an unlikable bitch. But it just feels very low of her to cut off all contact with her own mother just because she's become a vampire. For the most part, the vampires in the Twilight series are nice people.
Yeah.
Bella at least isn't. You could argue that she's evil, but she's not evil like Victoria was.
Yeah.
The vampires most of the vampires in Twilight are debatably good guys. So I wouldn't think that Bella becoming a vampire would be enough for her to justify staying away from her mom.
And at the wedding, they have all the extended Cullen family, who are all obviously vampires.
There was I think I did notice an author cameo.
Maybe. So it just brought to mind, Carlisle gathering them all and saying, okay, Bella's family doesn't know we're vampires, so no one talk about that.
I did like how one of Bella's friends remarked, what a gene pool. I did think that was funny.
Why would anyone get married at 18 unless they're pregnant? Which I suspect is not in the book. And Anna Kendrick is way too good for this series. She's Oscar nominated now.
Who's that?
Anna Kendrick, the class president. She was Oscar nominated for Up in the Air, and she's Scott Pilgrim's sister.
I actually saw that film yesterday, I think. I liked it. I thought it was good.
Me too.
I still thought Inception was the better movie from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I guess we should bring this up. Breaking Dawn took the Harry Potter route of separating the final book into two movies. Now, the obvious reason for that would be more money for the author, the actors, and the company, especially. But for one, they could have edited the book down, condensed these two movies into one movie easily.
Like, you could tell this story just in this movie in an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you could probably tell the next movie, and, the Breaking Dawn Part 1 and 2 in, just a standard feature-length movie. It might only take like 80 minutes.
Deathly Hallows actually had enough story to justify two movies if they didn't want to make one that was like 3.5 hours long. And Harry Potter's much more worthy of being called a saga.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't get, well, for one, they didn't need to separate these movies. The only reason they're doing it is for money, and so the Twilight Saga lasts a bit longer in the public consciousness, but there's really no reason to separate them this far. The Matrix sequels, which I like the Matrix sequels. I've said that before. Anyway, the Matrix sequels, they were spaced out
a few months.
Yeah, only like 6 months at the most. I think they were released in the same year. So why are the films spaced out with double that time? There's absolutely no reason to space them out that far.
They want to stop people jumping ship to something else, making people associate them with that.
I think I have to assume that Breaking Dawn Part 2 will be quite an anticlimax, even when compared to all the others. Yeah. From what I've read of the synopses, all Breaking Dawn Part 2 is going to be will be basically Bella getting used to being a vampire, the Volturi coming to Forks, and the Cullen clan gathering witnesses and other half-human, half-vampire people to prove that Renesmee is not a threat.
Getting used to being a vampire could be a good story, but I don't think this is going to be it.
But really, those plot threads and plot elements aren't as interesting. And of course, I forgot, Renesmee growing up, growing up very rapidly. Those plot threads aren't, getting used to being a vampire, that could be interesting. But the others aren't as interesting as a vampire-human hybrid growing inside Bella and threatening to kill him. Just not that interesting. I'll still see it, because, I've got to finish what I started.
I don't think I'll see this one in the theater. Just wait for the riff tracks again. And I can't wait for the riff tracks for this movie.
Really, aside from aside from Bella's father, were there any characters in Breaking Dawn, or for that matter, the entire franchise that you liked?
Oh, Jacob, I guess.
Yeah.
He's the one who's sacrificing things and taking risks for her and get shafted for it.
So, I would agree. I did like, I guess I did like some of the werewolves on Jacob's side. Seth Clearwater.
Has Seth appeared before? Maybe he has, but none of them make any impression on me anyway.
He must have been in number 3, but he wasn't really that important. He wasn't really that important in Breaking Dawn either. But it's funny though, I'm not sure whether I should be amused or ashamed to mention that, and of course, millions of other people can say this as well, but I share my name, the Twilight character, I share my name with the werewolf kid, Seth. So,
well, I share my name with hardly any fictional characters. Just the lead from Cellular, as far as I know. Well, you also have the lead from The Fly, Seth Brundle.
Yeah, there's that. That's more respectable. Well, that's a more respectable property to share your name with. This is just a complete tangent, but I have to wonder if anybody in the world actually has the name Cirrus. Because, Cirrus is one of the brothers from the first Myst game. I have to wonder if that is a real name, if anyone in the world has it. That's completely off topic.
Because, of course, a bunch of people have the name Akinar.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the Myst games?
Well, I played the first 3, which were good for how they lasted. I couldn't get halfway through Riven without a strategy guide.
I play all of my adventure games with strategy guides.
They're good scenery porn.
Oh, actually, I guess that leads us back to Breaking Dawn, which is this subject of this crossover. I think some people have described the Twilight series as essentially erotica for young teens. How do you feel about that position?
Like, as a movie series that you see to watch people take their shirts off, I have to admit it's a success. But you can find better stuff with that, even.
Well, for one, society should encourage people to get together with nice people with good characters, and Harry Potter has a lot of those.
Yeah.
It has a lot of good people, whereas good people with strong personalities. Whereas there are a lot more characters in Harry Potter that young children could legitimately have a crush for. But in Twilight, all of the characters, with the exception of Jacob, are even Jacob to a good extent. Even though he's a nice guy, he's still pretty dull. And of course, Edward and Bella are bland and unlikable.
It's like Star Trek Enterprise. Everyone's just a blank slate.
I was trying to think if there's anything. Well, I've gone through why I didn't like the film. Bland acting, dull, unlikable characters, a completely tepid romance, a really heavy-handed abortion message. But I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, beyond the cinematography and the birthing scene that I liked about the movie. I guess, you go ahead. Was there much in the film that you legitimately liked, beyond the cinematography?
Well, just the makeup effects on Bella as she's getting worse. Because those looked really good, and I don't know if there was any, real starving herself Christian Bale style in there, but I'm actually interested in finding out, which is more than you can say for a lot of this stuff.
As far as I'm concerned, Breaking Dawn, worst film of the year. Would you go along with that, or
yeah.
have you seen worse?
I thought Transformers 3 was down there. I know you don't.
Actually, on that note, last year, I think Eclipse was being either. I think it was the second worst film I saw last year. It was above Skyline.
Last Airbender.
I actually didn't see that. That was the worst film you saw last year?
Yeah, that's the movie responsible for Eclipse not being the worst movie released on a certain weekend. That is really sad.
But in 2009, I obviously wasn't thinking straight. I actually classed New Moon as one of the good movies of last year. The worst movie I saw in 2009 was Star Trek.
I kind of like that one.
Why?
Just for a base action level.
Oh yeah, well, I can appreciate it on that level, but I did find Kirk to be a cruel jackass.
It's a setup movie, so it's all a trailer for the sequel, basically.
So, shall we, do you have anything else to add?
Not really.
Shall we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Do you want to give your final thoughts?
It's worth watching for occasional bits of gruesomeness. Otherwise, just skip this one, I'd say.
Agreed. I'm not usually the sort of person who appreciates, bad films. Ironically, there are films I do like for how bad they are, such as Plan 9 from Outer Space. But something like The Room, but really The Room, or Breaking Dawn, they do have a few good points to them. I actually did think that The Room had some genuinely good things in it. But, they have some good points, and really I just can't be bothered to view Breaking Dawn or the other Twilight films as so bad they're good. I don't really feel fussed to view them as enjoyable for how bad they are. For me, they're just something I watch because I review them, but that's mainly it. I want to write a review on them, and I want to finish what I've started. I guess I'm kind of a completionist that way. I wouldn't, even though Breaking Dawn did have quite a gruesome, effective birthing scene. That was really the only good part of the film. Well, aside from the cinematography, the fact, the very ham-fisted, offensive abortion message is the thing that tips it over to something I didn't enjoy watching.
I have a hard time sitting through any of these movies. This is the first time I've gone through one in one sitting, and that's just because it was in the theater.
I can't recommend Breaking Dawn simply because I'm not usually the kind of person who does recommend so bad they're good movies. Well, I don't usually view films in that way. And, the anti-abortion message was handled in a very insulting way. So that really kills the film for me. Okay, all right, that's all from us. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me on this Breaking Dawn discussion.
Welcome.
Okay, and we'll see you guys later.
Goodbye.
Okay, cheers.